Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 552. My opponent played d4. I went with knight f6. I was thinking of playing the Grinfeld if I got the chance. He goes c4, I go g6, and he goes knight c3. So yeah, here's my chance. I can play the Grinfeld. I just need to play the move d5 right here. Instead, I played the move bishop g7. You can see those are the top two choices, d5 or bishop g7. And of course, this leads to the King's Indian defense, because after the pawn move e4, d5 is just ruled out. So you have to play d5, the previous move, if you want to go for the Grinfeld. Anyway, I go d6. And now my opponent selects this somewhat unusual setup with bishop d3 and knight to e2. But it turns out that's quite a respectable way for white to play, and interesting. So the more normal moves are bishop to e2 and knight to f3, set up that way, and this bishop comes out somewhere along this diagonal. That's the classical systems and various other systems in the King's Indian. But this is another way to play it, and it's not bad. You can see from the evaluation, it still keeps that edge that white has often in the King's Indian. So I castle and knight to e2. So the bishop has kept that e2 square clear for the knight, and then the knight can come out either to f4 or to g3. So a pretty interesting setup. It looks like the main response here is knight c6. Normally in the King's Indian, not against this setup, but against other setups, you play e5 first, and then knight c6 later. And the combination of knight c6 and e5 often provoke a d5 push, and then the knight goes to e7. So that's a kind of setup I'm most familiar with, and I start out with e5. It turns out you can play knight c6 first, and it's a better move. The immediate... let's just play the main line. In case I see this setup again, I want to know how to play against it. So knight c6. If he pushes on with d5, you can play knight to e5, attacking the bishop, so that's okay. The main response here is castles, and then e5. And now after d5, instead of going to e7, Engine is suggesting that the best move here is knight to d4. So pretty interesting way to play. Not one I would have thought of. So let's see, after this exchange, aren't you just losing a pawn here? Knight to b5 maybe going after the pawn, and rook to e8 going after the e-pawn. So pretty interesting play for black. So that's definitely the line to try against this particular setup. Anyway, I didn't know any of that, and so I just played e5 here. He goes d5, and now the problem is the knight can't get to the c6 square, so you don't get this maneuver, knight c6 to e7 or the others. So I brought the knight out to d7 immediately. Maybe it's better to go ahead and undermine with c6 first. But anyway, this is can't be all that bad. He goes knight g5, knight g3. Bishop to g5 was an interesting idea there as well. But anyway, we get out of the opening, and we have a typical advantage for white in the space. So the computer likes white's position in the King's Indian quite a lot. But black can usually get some counterplay on one side or the other. I decided to go with c5. The idea being to lock up the center and then go for some kind of pawn break on the b file. That's what I was playing for. It just turns out that's a bad choice. That doesn't... white can stop that. And so it's just not working out, my plan. So a better way to play here would be moves like c6 and knight to c5. Knight, that's a good square for the knight, hitting the bishop, and then maybe later playing e5 to secure that square. And c6, of course, is a way to undermine the center. So all those look like reasonable plans. Anyway, I go c5. He castles. And then I go rook b8, trying to set up this b5 push. He plays h3, just securing some squares on the king side. I go a6. He goes a4. And after this, actually, he's kind of ruled out the b5 push. He's got two pieces and two pawns covering that square, and I really can't organize enough force to manage to get that pawn push in. So I settle for b6. At least if he plays a5, then I can counter with b5. So that is something. And maybe you can play b5 as a pawn sack if after a5. It would open up a line at least. He goes queen c2 here. I go rook b7, and he goes rook b1. I think I was trying to double on the b file, but it's not working out for me. So I switched my attention to the king side to play h6. I'm going to get my king to the h7 square, secure this, and maybe play for a pawn break on the other side. He goes bishop to e3. King to h7, securing the h6 pawn. He goes b4 now. So this actually helped me. The chess engine, wants white to just kind of sit on this position and not do a whole lot actively. b3, just moving it up one square. Rook to a1, which does nothing at all. Queen to d2, some sort of queen maneuver. f3. So just kind of sitting on the position and trying to, white has more space. So in my cramped position, it may be that I'll have trouble finding moves at a certain point, finding squares for my pieces. They are kind of in each other's way already a little bit. The knight's blocking the bishop. This rook on b7 isn't making a very good impression either. I had ideas of perhaps doubling on the b file, but it doesn't look like that's happening. So anyway, this b4 move kind of helps me out, frees up my game by giving me a square for the knight. But still advantage to white here. Okay, so bishop e2, cancel that. He drops the bishop away from d3 rather, to keep it away from the knight. I go queen c7, defending this pawn and staying out of the way of the bishop. I want to try and get the bishop out of the way and be able to double rooks, so it's part of this plan. But he doubles rooks on the b file first. I go bishop d7, and then he switches attention to the other side of the board. So at this point, actually, the evaluation switches to even, or even favorable to black. Kind of funny, because white's been winning the whole way, and he's been piling up pressure on the b file. Probably the most logical continuation here is queen to b2, just continuing with that theme, piling up on the queen side here. Having arranged all his pieces over on the queen side, it doesn't make all that much sense to open up a second front on the king side. He's not all that well poised to take advantage of it. So it looks like that's a mistake. Now, throughout the game, the advantage switches back and forth, so I'm not going to call out every time that happens. I'm just going to go through it, or it'll be a long game. But I did want to call it a few points where, at least I seem to understand why the evaluation is switching. It's just not a great idea to open up a second front right here. Anyway, I continue with a5, kicking his rook back, and then I take. He takes, and play rook e8. It's a good file for my rook. He goes bishop f3, defending his e-pawn, and I go g5. Okay, so this is the first outright blunder. So g5 is a mistake, and there's a winning continuation for white. So if you want to think about this is your first tactical quiz in this video, why don't you pause the video and see if you can figure out, first of all, what's wrong with the move g5, and then second of all, what's the best way for white to exploit that. Okay, I'm going to give the answer away now. I did play g5, and the problem with it is that it opens up this diagonal to my king, and so now this move, this pawn can come forward with the check. Now, in the game, I thought the immediate e5 check was the way to play this, but it turns out there's an even stronger move because, well, okay, I have to move my king. I'm in check. Well, that's one idea. One way to deal with it is to move the king, and but here when he takes the knight, I can take the bishop, and if he takes my bishop, I can take his knight. We can just keep on taking pieces, or he can move the knight out of the way, and then I can drop my bishop back. So he doesn't actually win a piece in that line. I thought he was winning a piece, but he doesn't. So that's one way to take advantage of that pin, but it's not the best way. The most accurate move, as you can see, is to first of all get this bishop away from the pawn, so that I don't have the idea of taking his bishop after he takes my knight. And he can do it with tempo by taking on d6 here, because that hits my queen, And if my queen takes back, this is the key point. If my queen takes back, then he plays e5 check, winning the queen. So that loses the whole queen. So I can't take that bishop. And if I just drop my queen back, then he can play this e5 check, and now he's winning a whole piece. So that is the best way for white to exploit my blunder. Instead, he just retreated the bishop. And then I decided to block the pawn with rook to e5. I'd spotted this tactic by this point. But the best way actually to deal with this is just to move the king out of the way. King to g8 is the best move here. The rook on e5 is vulnerable to this attack from the bishop, bishop d4. Let's see, I played knight e8 so that I can take back here with the bishop when he exchanges. And I was expecting him to take. It's interesting that the chess engine doesn't even want to take right away. It is true. This knight's not, this rook is not going anywhere. It's kind of stuck there because it needs to prevent the e-pawn from coming forward as long as there's this discovered attack idea in the air. So white has other moves that he could play to improve the position, and it's interesting that a couple suggestions are bishop to, let's erase these guys. Bishop to h5, hitting the f1 pawn, f7 pawn, or rook to f1. Anyway, two ideas of how to pile up on this f7 pawn, which is sitting here unprotected. So, and then I guess this rook is not going anywhere. I've got to deal with these threats. So that would be the most accurate way to play. It's interesting that after he takes immediately, this is no longer so clear. We're once again back in the range of about even. But like I say, there are lots of twists and turns in this game. So let's just continue on. He goes knight f5. Back up. Knight f5 is a mistake. This is your next tactical quiz opportunity. So why don't you see if you can figure out, after knight f5, there's a tactic that black has in the position. So why don't you see if you can figure out what black can play after knight f5. Okay, I'm going to give the answer away. This is a nice example of something I call the exchange and fork. So let's put that on. The exchange is this part. You take the knight, and he takes back. So, exchanges are forcing moves. He's pretty much got to take back unless he wants to lose material. But after the exchange, these two pieces are in a forking position, and you can play knight takes a4. So these exchange and fork tactics are pretty common, very handy. Also, you might have found this idea just by noticing that if you take the knight, you're removing the defender from the a4 pawn, so you at least win a pawn. But in fact, you win not only a pawn, but a pawn plus the exchange. So that would be a way for me to get back in the game. Let's see, I drop down to queen c8, and white's got his advantage restored. He goes rook e1. I go knight f6 now. Let's see, there's one more tactic coming up. He goes rook b to b1, so he's sort of reorganizing his pieces, bringing him over to the queen side. And yeah, this move I play queen e8. And after queen e8, there's another tactic that white has. So see if you can figure out what tactic white has available in this position after queen to e8. Okay, pause the video if you want time to think about it. I'm going to give the answer away now. I did play queen e8, and now he has a very interesting move, knight takes d6. So first of all, this is a fork. It's hitting the queen, and it's hitting the rook. But, well, I can take it. That square was defended. That was the idea. But the bishop was doing two jobs. It was defending that square, but it was also preventing the e-pawn from coming forward, and my king is still sitting on this diagonal. So e5 check is still in the position. And after I move my king, pawn takes. White's an exchange up in this position. He did that particular transaction, just won a pawn, but more importantly, it opened up these lines towards my king side and gave him these strong pawns in the center. So looks like a winning position for white to me. In addition to that, he's up material because he won the exchange earlier. So that would be a way to finish me off here. Let's see, he played knight to b5. bringing the other knight in, ganging up on this d6 pawn. He kind of had spotted this weakness. So I take off one of the knights. He takes back. And now finally there's no more threat of the e5 push. So this pawn is, well, actually it's not quite defended. There's still this pin on my bishop. So I play queen to d7. And now this pawn is pretty well defended. And at this point he decides to give back the exchange. So just holding on. I mean, the queen was also attacking here. Yeah, it's defended. So I wasn't really making a threat. I was just defending my pawn. But shoring up his structure with the move g4 here keeps white with a solid advantage. So when he gives the exchange back here, then this actually helps me out. And then after the move d6, I have the move e4, kicking his bishop around, and suddenly the tide has changed again, and I have a slight edge. But like I say, it keeps going back and forth. So anyway, he goes bishop g4. I went knight d3, trying some clever knight maneuvers. Although, what did I have? Just king g7. Yeah, this knight on f6 is loose. King g7, going over to defend the knight is a good idea. Queen to d8, also defending the knight. Anyway, yeah, he can gain some tempos on my knight. So that happens here. After knight d3, he plays queen c3, play king g7 now, and then he goes rook f1. So queen to c8, I'm trying to figure out how to organize my pieces here and get them into the game. I'm also eyeing this c5 square. Maybe I can get something going with the queen and the knight against his king. He goes bishop to e2, hitting my knight. I throw in the check. There's king h1, bring my knight to f4. He brings his bishop back to g4, and then rook to d7. So securely blockading this d-pawn. That's his biggest advantage in this position now. The material is now even. We count, yeah, even number of pawns as well, 3, 4, 5, 6. But his pawns are a bit scattered and weak, so actually there's an advantage to black still in this position. White plays the move g3, kicking my knight. And the only move here actually is knight to d3. I just have to move the knight back to where it came from, and I'll be okay. Instead, I saw this weird tactic. I thought there was a pin on the pawn, and so he couldn't take my knight. But of course, his queen is defended by his knight here on b5. So anyway, this is the losing move finally. Knight to d5, and he can just take that. And I don't really have anything better than trading queens. But after this, he goes on to win. Although he doesn't do this in the best way. It's interesting that right here, he needs to play something like rook to d1. Just kind of hold on to the pawns for a while and reorganize. He just needs to activate his bishop, get it into the game, and he should be able to win this pretty easily. When he plays knight b5, he's actually giving me some chances here. I pick up a pawn, and well, I've got these, potential. I have a potential passed pawn on the queen side, an extra pawn in the center. So I do have 2 pawns in compensation for the piece all of a sudden, and it's not so clear. But white still is winning here, and I don't play the best way either. I think we're getting low on time at this point. And so after a bunch of shuffling around, where white keeps the edge the whole way, and in fact his advantage has increased through this part of the game. I thought I was making progress picking up another pawn here, but you can see he's still winning. And then I just finally ran out of time at this point. I couldn't find a move quick enough, and it's not easy to find a move here. Basically, they're all losing. Rook to f4 is the best move, but white is just winning. So anyway, good game. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.